Okay. Hi, Michael. Hi, friend.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for making yourself available to speak with all of our It's Just Lunch clients.
The heck else are we going to do right now? We're all quarantined, so boy, am I available.
Well, I got to say, this whole experience for me has been inspiring. I feel like very creative, a lot of creativity coming out of it. And so I'm using a lot of my time really, that creativity is kind of going into soul searching, so to speak. And that's why I thought of you the other day, and I thought, you are the ultimate thought leader. You're the ultimate hobbyist. I think you're a fantastic conversationalist. I love your take on dating. So I really thought this was going to work well, especially during this time. So I wanted to share our conversation, and I think a good place to start would be your story, sharing. I guess for everyone listening, Michael is the creator and host of the Solopreneur Hour podcast, a wildly successful podcast. And I thought musician turned solopreneur in Denver, would be a great place to start.
Well, first of all, thank you for all those nice things. You're my new agent. I'm not sure if you know that yet. You're now officially my agent. One thing I think it's happening now, I don't know if we're, obviously, we're recording this in the middle of the coronavirus, sort of I'm hoping at the peak of this isolation that's happening. And I think what's happening with a lot of people is that they're having to evaluate what they do for a living. And necessity is the mother of invention. I think we're going to see a lot of very interesting businesses come out of this. And I think you can react in I guess I'm just going to hang out on the couch and binge on Netflix, or you can be proactive with your life or with your business, and in fact, I just did a show on this yesterday. There's never been a better time than right this second to pivot or learn a new hobby or change your career. Like right now, this forced time off that we all have really can be looked at as a gift, where we're so lucky to have things like YouTube and audible.com and blogs and message boards and Facebook groups to literally learn whatever you want. You can learn any hobby you want. You can learn any instrument you want. Spend 20 minutes a day on the tuba. You're going to be a pretty rad tuba player, by the end of the month, certainly better than you were. I don't recommend it. I think that'd be a really bad idea for everybody involved. But, you want to learn the drums like I do, or the guitar, or, how to do woodworking or something, now's the time. So I think that maybe my story was predicated on that. We all have our own challenges where we're often dealt cards that our friends aren't, or that people we know aren't, and we have to deal with them the way that the best way we can. And in my case, I had to start over at the age of 37 and figure out what I wanted to do. And it was it was a long road, but the same impetus I had then is sort of what's happening now. It's very parallel in that way, is that you get forced into this thing and you adapt, or you get smushed by it. And I chose not to get smushed by it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking of, how you've always done this. You've always taken something and created more out of it, and so I did wonder, is that something that's inside us? What is that thing, that personality trait, or that drive to not sit on the couch and binge Netflix, but to say, you know what, I'm going to get my real estate license. You know what, I'm going to learn the guitar, just like you said. So, what do you think about that?
I think that it has a lot to do with environment, and some is nature, some is nurture. So I think that I think the thing I might have gotten from my dad is the pick yourself up by your bootstraps thing, the work ethic part. But maybe, I mean, I don't know, maybe the entrepreneurial gene as well, just because one thing about my dad is he was always a fearless trier. You know what I mean? Like he would just, if the house needed a new roof, this is obviously long before things like YouTube, he would just go buy roofing stuff. He'd buy a new tool and he'd go put the roof on. And you go, all right, well, I guess we have a roof now, you know? I remember he was like this, he was this bargain hunter, whether he needed it or not. Like he literally couldn't pass up a good deal. So he came home one day after he had retired and he was in Florida. He came home with scuba gear. This is a guy in his, 68 years old or whatever he was. Came home with like a truck full of scuba gear and tanks. And we're like, Dad, what the hell are you going to do with that? Like, you're not going to start scuba diving. Well, he had a boat and he hired 2 guys to put the gear on and clean barnacles off of the ships and the boats in the marina. So he sort of got the thing and said, what can I do with this? And then that's what he ended up doing, is making a business out of it. So I think that part has stuck a little bit, you know?
Oh, I would say so. I mean, if I think back to some of these passions that you've had, that you have turned into revenue producing streams, I'm impressed by it, right? So Solopreneur Hour is one. And that podcast that you did yesterday, excellent. I think everybody should download and listen to it because it was really helpful and insightful.
It's 804, I think. Episode 804 of the Solopreneur Hour, I believe, is what that was.
And I'll attach it to this stream. But tell me a little bit about that. I want everybody to get a feel for just what hobbyist, when I say you're the ultimate hobbyist, what that means, because it's business, it's drumming, it's Porsche.
Yeah.
It's
well, so let's see. I think the best way to I have a buddy, Clay Hebert, and Clay, he came over to my house one time and I was under my car doing some stuff and he stopped. And this is a guy really, he knows some big timers. He's been in Tim Ferriss's book. He's Neil Strauss. He was with him for many years, not biblically. And he was just, he's really rolls deep with some big time players, but he stopped and he said, dude, you do more things you love on a regular basis than anybody else I know. And I don't know that there's been a higher compliment. In fact, I've formulated a kind of a keynote around it. And I've only done it once so far, but it's something I really want to do more of once we obviously get out of this. But I had this neighbor, Julia K. Lovely. This is, I owned a house in Boulder, Colorado, like whatever it was, 10 years ago. And she was across the street from me in this condo complex. And she was beautiful and 23 and a hip hop dancer. That was her thing. So she was like a chick that could have been a model, but she was like full on hip hop dancer, like triple oversized, baggy everything, one leg pulled up, hat, like, what's up, And we became super close friends and occasional lovers, and 4 a.m. drink a bottle of wine, kind of deep soul friends. And she probably came to 50 of my shows. I was in a very popular band in Colorado. I was the drummer, and we played all over Colorado and the West Coast and Arizona and stuff like that. And she probably came to 50 of my shows. And let's 5 years into this friendship, she says, hey, and here's what I knew about Julia, other than she was this wonderful soul. She worked for her dad's coffee company, and then she would go to the dance studio. Like, that's what I knew about her. But then she says, 5 years into this, she says, hey, my dance troupe is having a performance. Will you come? And I was like, of course I will. I can't wait. So I go there. I'm sitting in the first or second row, and they start. And Jolene, within 60 seconds, I'm in tears. I'm sobbing because I realized that I've known this woman for 5 years, but this is the first time I've actually seen her. This is where she lives. And I had no idea. Like, I had no idea that that's where home was for her. And I said, holy shit, I need to do a better job of getting to know people, because this is it. And I think sometimes when, okay, so let's bookmark that for a second. So I started thinking about this. I have a buddy, Mike Sherbakov, that had an Instagram post a couple of years ago. And I was speaking to a muggle. And by that, I mean, if you ever follow any of the Harry Potter books, I mean, someone who maybe hasn't done any personal development. They haven't read any entrepreneurial books. They don't come to the entrepreneurial conferences. This is a foreign world. They've never read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This is a very foreign world to them. And I was talking about the things that made me, as an animal, as a human animal walking around on the planet Earth, the happiest, funniest, sexiest, highest version of myself. What am I doing at those times? And I said, well, it's when I'm playing my drums, hopefully in front of an audience of some sort. It's when I'm on a great deep dive conversation on my podcast, and it's amazing. It's when I have a new friend and 2 bottles of wine, and we sit in my home theater and we listen to music and we watch music YouTube videos for hours, and we connect over that. And it's amazing what that 3rd glass of wine unlocks, which is why it has to be 2 bottles, because you can't get that from 2 people drinking 1 bottle. It's when I step off a train in a foreign country and step onto their main street for the first time. And I go, okay, what does this one do? And it's when I'm, like I was yesterday, in the garage, working on the car, problem solving and making things with my hands. All of those 5 things are things that make me the highest elevated version of myself. And as I was saying this to this woman, I said, holy shit, I do all of those things on a regular basis. That's like, I've just described my life.
Right.
And so I remember, I said, I'm thinking, how did that happen? And I was reminded of a quote by my buddy, Mike Sherbakov, who said, don't prioritize your schedule your priorities. Don't prioritize your schedule your priorities. And I think that really sunk in with me in 2017. And I just started saying, look, I love doing these things. Get them on the calendar, because work and life is always going to fill in around that stuff. But if you have a shit day, but you've already done something you've loved that day, you've gone on a hike, you've hung out with your kids, you've done things that feed your soul, then day's not that bad. And I started interviewing my Uber drivers with this concept. And I thought I would say to them, what's the thing that makes you like the happiest version of yourself? I had this woman that said, oh my God, I love spending time with my niece. She's 4 years old. Her giggle lights me up like nothing else in the world. And, it's amazing to be able to experience this time in her life. And I said, fantastic. When do you see her? She goes, well, I see her at Christmas time. I go, oh, okay. So let me get this straight. I go, where does she live? She goes, she's in Vegas. And I was in San Diego at the time. And I go, okay, let me get this straight. The thing that makes you self-described, literally the happiest version of yourself as a human walking around on the planet Earth is a 45-minute plane ride that costs 1 day of driving Uber, and you do it 1 time a year. And she paused for 10 seconds and she said, I never thought of it like that. She goes, my sister invites me all the time. I'm like, go see your niece before that magical time in her life is over. And she's 7, and she's a different human at that point. So she says, I'm going to drop you off. I'm going to book that ticket right now. I go, book that ticket. But it dawned on me right then that there's something about being an adult, and I'm making air quotes if you're just listening to this on audio. Someone told us at some point that it was kid stuff. We're not allowed to do this stuff anymore because it's kid stuff. We can't take horseback lessons or dance bachata, or salsa, or paint pictures or sing songs. And I thought, man, if I'm speaking at a conference and I said, who can sing me a song right now? And there was 500 people, I'd get 6 hands that would raise. And if I said, who can paint me a picture, I'd get another 6 hands that would raise. But if I asked those same 2 questions to a room full of 5-year-olds, every hand would have gone up.
Mm.
So at what point did we tune out that we're allowed to be happy? Just because we had a kid? You're not allowed to be a human being anymore because you had a child? You can't take a dance class anymore because you're too, quote unquote, responsible? Really? Because I don't remember that being the case when I was a kid. My mom got babysitters when she wanted to do something that she wanted to do. You know, it's like the children didn't take over our lives. And the cool thing about this idea is that it has nothing to do with your finances. You can scrape together some stuff to paint a picture or to go on a hike for free or to study, to get a hand-me-down guitar and go on YouTube for free and learn how to play it. It doesn't have to be about like, oh, I really want to just worldwide travel. I'm like, all right, you can even do that on the cheap if you want to, but this is not necessarily a class system. So I think that once that got burned into my brain, I always default to yes. Do I want to do this because it makes me feel good? Yeah, I sure do. You know, and that also happened because, you know, I got a phone call of my dad passed away, and then I got a very shocking phone call a couple months later that was like, your mom passed away this morning. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so ever since then, I said, you know, your ticket can get punched anytime, anywhere, anyway. So you better start saying yes and doing cool stuff with your life. And that's kind of how I roll.
It is. I mean, what I do, I called you and said, hey, I want to talk to you. I want a conversation. I want to interview. I want to share who you are with our clients. And you said, yeah, you did. So immediately, you know,
Yeah,
and I think that,
yeah. And you said, I'm going to send you questions. Like, I don't want you to send me questions.
yeah, you're like, doesn't send me any questions. Let me just talk.
Talking.
Well, and I think that that's actually bringing so much even more value is for, you know, in dating, the art of conversation is a lost art. People get on these dates and they have, you know, so how long have you been dating? And what's that like for you? Instead of, you know, okay, if you could live anywhere in the world, beaches, mountains, desert, you know, farm, like where would it be? You know, and I'm a huge fan of the cheesy date questions. I love them. I can't get enough of them.
Right. Well, sure.
You know,
It's like when I see it on the swipey swipes.
Something different.
When I see it on the swipey swipes, it's if I get the how's your week, if that's really your open or just hi on Bumble, I'm like, really? You got nothing? You got nothing else for me? And if someone has nothing on their profile or it's really like milk toast generic answers, I'm like, well, there's no way we're going to be a fit. I want an interesting, clever human on there. And I don't want to see your Snapchat filters if you're over 18 either. Like,
right.
You know what I mean?
Get in touch with your inner kid, but just not leave out
I don't want to see silly
dog
filtered
ears.
face and dog ears at all. Like, I'm like, we're not a fit. You know, to me, it just says you wish you were still 22.
Well, and you know,
that's a bad sign.
22 is fun.
It was fun, but not when you're 45.
No, it's very
That's what
different.
I'm saying. Like when you get that and I go, all right, I get it. Like you used to be this head turner, but now here you are. And here we are in our 40s, and you better like be 40. And by the way, still be beautiful and sexy and elegant, not childish.
Right. Well, you bring up such a good point. You know, a lot of our clients, you know, are the 40 plus for sure. And there's this magical stage that I've been seeing with women and men that are in their early 60s. That it's fascinating to me because the thing that is making them the most successful is comfortable in their own skin, transparent, able to say, yeah, I am interested, you know, or no, you're great, but I'm looking for something different. You know, just this passion. I want to go travel. I want to complete around their old relationships, you know? So when you talk about losing your parents and how that changed, you know, your mindset, it really is such an important thing. And then you also mentioned, you said, you know, I want to table this. I did want to bring it right back because you mentioned that, and I lost it. What did you table? It was brilliant.
I thought I brought it all back. I felt pretty solid that I brought everything back that I had said I'd get back to this. But how my brain works, it's already fluttered away into a different county. So
really what I wanted to get is, you know, what that drive comes from, what that mindset comes from. And I think you did do an excellent job of painting a picture around that. As far as conversation is concerned on these dates, it's like, now is the time. If you do not have anything going on in your life, you know, you're not up to anything big, find out what that is. And I think, you know, you said, ask yourself this question, you know, of what makes me truly the happiest version of myself. That's an excellent thing to do. And if you don't know what that is, put some thought around it, right?
I've got a couple of good questions that are fun. Like, what did your childhood smell like? That's one of my favorite questions in the world. You can't open with it, but if you get a little bit of rapport, you got a half a glass of wine in you, and then I break that out and I'll ask you this: what did your childhood smell like? And then I'll explain why it's such a cool question. So what did your childhood smell like, Jolene?
The first thing that came to my mind was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And then I thought, no, it's more like grilled cheese.
Okay. Why?
I guess because I recently just made one for my daughter and she loved it and I loved them growing up. And so it's kind of just top of mind right now.
What else? What other smells?
Definitely food. So my mom was always cooking and, you know, gasoline was a big smell, which is odd now that I think about it. But, you know, my dad had this, he was always a Cadillac man, right? And we always had these big beefy Cadillacs. And they always just smelled like gas. Crazy.
Well, so, all right. So this is what's really cool about that is a lethal question. It is so good on so many levels. It's kind of a two-phaser because the first thing you can find out is if somebody's left-brained or right-brained just by asking the question.
Okay.
So the creative people will answer. The people that are more buttoned up and a little more spreadsheet oriented will always question the question. So right out of the gates, they're going to go, wait, what did you mean? And then, you know, okay, I'm dealing with a more logical, scientific person. And then if they just answer, you go, okay, so this person has some creativity, that's a little more vibe. So you got left brain versus right brain right out of the gates. Second, and I had to prompt you a little bit, but generally the way you ask it is to ask the question and then they answer it and you don't respond to their answer. Because I don't want a lot of dead air. You said grilled cheese and I said, that's not really the answer. But I just sat there and you didn't respond. So I said, why? And then even the answer you gave, that wasn't the real answer because the next two were the real answers.
Right.
You said, oh, my mom was always cooking and blah, blah, blah. And then you said my dad was into Cadillacs. And what happens is it's really interesting as people start really ruminating over the question and they start digging into these actual smells, there's always a story that goes along with it. They'll say the smell and then they'll say why the smell is the smell and what the deal is. And what's really funny about this and when we consider how people connect, this is something I study for a living. And I'm in fact, I have a course called The Art of the Interview. So it's really about the art of conversation. But it takes 5 connecting points to establish rapport with someone. And so you really feel like, oh, this is really cool. And I'm vibing with this person. That question can sometimes get you all 5 in one shot. It's like this silver bullet of question because I have a number of ways I can go with you now. If this were our first date, I could get into, what kind of food did your mom cook? Like, what was the thing? And then all of a sudden you'd probably start digging into your background and your grandma used to do this and the cook, she got it from these recipes. And then we used to do a Sunday thing and family. So that's a whole 30 minutes of conversation.
You'd eventually find out that I am a terrible cook.
Right. And be like, all right, well, check please. No. And so the other thing that I might have started with, because it's very interesting, is my dad also collected old Cadillacs. So that speedometer, that big square Cadillac speedometer that was in that car was actually instrumental with my snowboard racing coach, Scott Fliegelman, where he taught how to finish a turn with the old Cadillac speedometer, which was this thing that was a big square, it was a big rectangle, and the thing used to go like this. And so he would say, imagine that being fully on edge was all the way at 60, and then 0 was being on flat. And so instead of going, right now you're going 0 to 60 and then back to 0. I want you to go 0 to 60, back to 0. And I had this great visual of what we would call finishing a turn, which also comes in handy when you're racing cars, is to finish the one turn before you get into the other. So I still think of this Cadillac speedometer going back and forth like that. And what an interesting connect that I didn't know about you, that you sort of grew up in this garage environment. And I see the big giant Cadillacs with the big fins and the square gauges and all the things. But right out of the gates, so that is a ninja question that sounds silly when you first ask it. And then the deeper you go, whoa, that's a great question. So I'll tell you one more story about another great question that I got. I was playing this shit dive bar in Laramie, Wyoming with my band. I don't know when it was, 2000s at some point. And as the drummer, I'm always lugging a million heavy things. I've got drums. I've got this, we call it the body bag. It's all the drum gear. It's super heavy. It's probably 150 pounds of pipes and drum stands and shit like that. And so I'm in this dingy, disgusting alley of this crappy dive bar in Wyoming. And it's like, it's dented and graffitied and there's dirt and gross, you know? And so I'm lugging this stuff up and I'm lugging from my car and gunk, gunk, gunk. I knock on the door. And the guy that opens the door is so grisly. Like he makes Clint Eastwood look like James Bond. He's a grisly Wyoming cowboy dude. And I go, hey, I was a drummer. Blah, blah. He goes, I can't let you pass yet. You gotta answer a question. And I go, okay, great. And he goes, what's your favorite thing? And I thought, interesting, Wyoming redneck grizzly guy. What's my favorite thing? And I thought for a second and I said, turning. And he goes, explain. And I said, well, I started racing BMX bikes when I was a little kid. And then I moved into snowboards. And then I started racing mountain bikes. And then eventually I started racing cars. And then all of those activities require a person to turn better than their competition. Anybody can go straight fast. It's easy to push a pedal down or pedal faster and just kind of go straight. But to master the art of braking and then clipping an apex and then feeling the small of your back push because you nailed it just right, there's no better feeling than that. He goes, I got to say that's the best answer to that question I've ever gotten. And I said, great. And I started going and he said, one more question. And I go, what? He goes, what do 9 out of 10 people like? And I go, I don't know. He goes, a gangbang. Go on in. I was like, all right. Well, that's what I expected the first time. So loved it. I loved it. And that was my favorite question for a very long time, which was, what's your favorite thing? I would just say, what's your favorite thing? And inevitably people go, well, my children. I'm like, no, besides your children, what's your favorite thing? But then what did your childhood smell like? Got a little more specific and a little more cerebral because nothing, the smell's the number one memory trigger and music is number 2. So it's one of those things that just gets people thinking and finding a place to connect. And I love it. I love that art.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think the art of conversation is so important. It's key in dating. I believe that chemistry can be created on these dates through conversation. Would you agree that you can find someone physically and emotionally be attracted to them if that conversation is that inspiring?
I'm
the tough one.
I'm like Mr. Visual. So, I think as a designer and as someone who celebrates the aesthetic, it's harder for me to just be like, yeah, now I find you super hot. But I definitely have found people have been surprisingly sexy to me because of varying things, but certainly because of that. Yeah. Been like, wow, that's, and I've definitely spent a ton of time with people that I just love being around, even if I go, maybe this isn't going to be like the maybe this isn't my one forever, but we have such a great time together. There's such a fun conversationalist that I definitely find them attractive because of it.
Well, that brings up a good point too, is what about the people that are really introverted or, engaging at this level is more challenging for them, and I
I
always
got a
go
trick
back
for
to
them.
them.
I have something for them.
Oh, thank you.
I
Tell
can
me.
help them. So when you're introverted, this works at whether it's in a networking type situation or in a dating situation. And it's called the FORM method. And I don't know if have you ever heard this before? You know about this? So FORM stands for family, occupation, recreation, motivation. Those are 4 things that people love to talk about themselves. So if I just met you for the first time, we met in San Diego, and I said, instead of just saying, where are you from? Right? I might say something, have you always been in San Diego? Is your family here? And which is a much more open-ended question than, are you from here? Right? Did you grow up here? Yes or no? Stay away from yes or no's.
Right.
So I might say, does your entire family live here? And you might tell me whatever that story is about, well, we were blah, 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 and we moved down to here, blah, my brother's here, blah, blah. So now I've got now I know where your family is. Well, most of my family's in Jersey. They do this, blah, blah. Well, I might say, I spent a bunch of years at the Jersey Shore. Are you anywhere near there? And boom, you got a connecting point, right? Then occupation. I could say something like, did you move here for work, or was it just, you're in San Diego, the America's finest city. Did you just come here and then figure out what you were going to do like most people do? Or did you come here because a job brought you, kind of thing? And then, you could say, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, do you love your work? Do you love it? And you say, oh yeah, I run this thing. Well, it's just lunch. Blah, blah. It's great. In fact, most people, this is what that show was about that I just did. Most people like the work and hate the job. They don't like the commute. They don't like the person they work with. They got a crappy boss, but they still love the work. So people leave jobs for the wrong reasons, I think, sometimes. Anyway, and then the recreation. What are you doing here in San Diego? Are you a stand-up paddleboarder? Do you go mountain biking? Do you surf? Like, what are the things you do? What keeps you here? What do you love about Southern California? Why are you here? And then the motivation. Which is like, it's a very open-ended question, but it's like, look, what's the grand vision? Where are you going? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And those things can be an hour of conversation,
right?
But you're following a framework, and it doesn't have to be rigid. And I know some of you cerebral folks, oh, but his family, where's your family? But this conversation can flow, and it doesn't have to go in that order. It can go ORFM or whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be that exact order that you go in, blah, 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 blah. But just knowing FORM, family, occupation, recreation, motivation. Those are things that you can talk about with anybody. They'll be happy to talk about them. You can lead with any of those questions. What keeps you here? Why are you here? Is your family here? What's the story? And you'll win. It gives an introvert something to do.
Right. And I think that, finding the YouTubes, Googling good storytellers, I've done that recently, and there's some great people that tell some good stories, listening to podcasts, just hearing people give you the language to use, talk about, things in different ways. I often say that, if I ask you, what did you do last weekend? You can say, oh, I took my dog out and I went on a bike ride, and, I cooked dinner for myself. And I would think, okay, that's cool. He cooks, he's active. That's great. Or you could tell me, I took this little device, so you can't see it, device, and I threw it in a drawer, and, I went exploring in 4 to 8 hours, no phone. And for me personally, I would think, I'm intrigued. Who is this guy? I want to know more.
You could even one up that delivery by saying something like, when someone says, what did you do last weekend? And you say, when I was a kid, my grandfather used to take me hiking, and we wouldn't have anything. We wouldn't be in contact with our family at all for 3 days. And he taught me how to fish. We would wear backpacks and we'd camp, and he would tell me these really cool stories about what it was like to grow up in the US in the 1940s and how amazing it was. Well, this weekend I decided to recreate that with my kid, blah, blah, and then going, you know what I mean?
Woo!
So there's a way to tell that story that can reframe the entire
everything.
which means that like, again, all I did is I picked up on the motivation of why I did the thing I did. Instead of just saying the thing you did, you talk about why you did the thing you did. Like, what was the reason why you took your family out? And because, well, when I was a kid, my parents used to take us to the beach and we would go to Panama City. And I remember being in this thing and, you know what I mean? There's always a reason behind it. So I want to recreate that for my family right now. And so last weekend, we decided to do just that, you know?
That is excellent. You're really good at this.
Thank you. I should have a podcast.
I know, right? You, okay. So tell me a little bit about your dating life right now. Like, what are you going to do with your quarantine time?
Well, it's been, I have to say, it's been fairly non-existent. I had a going away party. This is where I get very confused about your kind, your gender is very confusing to me. I had a going away party in San Diego. I moved up to Long Beach and a friend brought another friend and we really vibed. Like I was like, wow. And she was she ticked all the boxes. Let's put it that way. And we made some plans. And she goes, so I just have to find this because it's so odd. Maybe you can help me with this.
Maybe I can.
I don't get this. So we chatted. You know, thanks for having me tonight. You know, I did the whole what's your number and did the thing. And she said, great. I said, you want to do tacos on Tuesday? And she said, yeah, that sounds great. So we did tacos on Tuesday, didn't we do?
Yeah.
We did. Yeah, we did gay tacos. And so we chatted back and forth a whole bunch. And we walked back and forth and said, hey, do you want to take a stroll in Balboa Park? Oh, God, I would have loved that. I got to work in the office today. And then we said, okay, we're doing Tuesday. So we scheduled Tuesday. And I wrote her in the morning, hey, top of the morning to you. Do you have a moment for a quick chat? I was going to run down kind of what the evening was going to look like. This is like 10 o'clock in the morning. And then didn't get a response. And later I said, hey, are you ready for a really fun evening? And she's like, no, I'm not. I'm so sorry. Wasn't able to respond because my day has been insane, blah, blah. And I go, oh, that's a bummer. Yeah, I said, you've been on my mind for a few days. And then she says, God, where have you been my whole life? I love how you communicate and I love your take charge attitude. It's very attractive. You have my word. I'm not trying to find ways around seeing you, but it's best for me not to try to make too much work. I said, all right, well, so what should I do? I want to support you here, but I also really want to see you and get a chance to know you before I venture off into the great unknown of Los Angeles. I said, I mean, I can help you take the trash out or something. And she goes, I think we just let it lie. Your new LA adventure is about to begin. And this week is insane to try to work something out. We listen to the universe on this one. Tonight is trash night, ironically. Last response I've gotten from her. Like, that was it. That was it. I go, God, well, I said, well, I wrote her a couple times just to say hello, nothing. I even wrote her yesterday and say, hey, how's it going for you in quarantine land? Nothing. And I'm like, man, I don't get women. I am so confused by your gender doth confuse me.
Well, I would say that if I could script, if I couldn't script it better for you. You did an excellent job. That's exactly how I would show up every single time with women that you're interested in. And I am trying, it is a goal of mine, one date at a time, one person at a time, to try to teach women how to communicate effectively when they're interested and when they're not interested, or if it's a timing thing, you know, but just to really, they feel bad. You know, 95% of my women, when I talk to them, I'll say, here's how you say no, thank you. When someone says, are you interested? You just tell them, you know, listen, you're a great storyteller. You're like fantastic. But if I'm being honest with myself, I'm looking for a different connection, you know, but thanks for meeting me. Right. And that's it, you know?
Yeah. Which is so much better than nothing.
Right. And the women, you know, will call me and they're like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. And so I'm really trying to change this. idea of, yeah, you really can. These men are dateable, lovable, like there's a lid for every pot. And so I think if someone at that isn't where your communication level is, you do have to just tell you that that is the universe keeping you available for someone who really is going to meet you at that level.
Yeah, I get that. But
Yeah.
somewhere along the lines, someone told women that ghosting and not communicating was the way. And I'm like, if men stopped pursuing because that was the case, people would not continue to exist anymore. The part of our core, like we persevere. It's what we do. That's in our DNA.
It's true. Even my clients, I will have to tell them, the women won't really want to pursue. And I'll say, well, typically, the men will say, do you want to go out or not? Or do you want to exchange numbers or not? And then it is up to you. If they've taken that courage and that confidence to ask you out, it is up to you to say yes or no.
Which sucks, by the way. It
Right.
sucks that it still feels exactly the same now in my 40s as it did when I was 15.
Yeah, well,
it's the same nerve-wracking, like, and this dog shit. Like, there's a girl that works at this place here in Long Beach. I have yet to have, well, I take that back. I think I'm 1 for 6 on conversations with her. So you've now experienced my conversational ability for the last whatever it's been. It's complete and utter dog shit every time I talk to this girl. I'm like, I sound so dumb every time. And I walk away going, that was the dumbest you could have possibly come off with that conversation. Every single time. That's how I know I like someone.
That's how you know you like someone. Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh my God. Anyway.
Keep working that.
Love it.
I saw Grant Cardone speak recently, and he was talking about, his wife was talking about how he emailed her. She kept on turning him down, and he emailed her for a year. And I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep chipping away.
Yeah.
Just keep chipping away. That's the thing. And maybe that's my point of this whole thing, which is if you're not interested, say you're not interested. Right. I'm great friends with people that we went on a date and they were like, you're rad, but not my cup of tea from a standpoint. We're great, amazing friends because of that. When they just don't respond, there's still like well, maybe, when the timing is right, like, or something goes on in our little male brain. We don't just get it like that. It's crazy.
I know. Well, I think a lot of people too, right now, our clients, I've been hearing some different things. And one thing I've been hearing is they want a date, right? They're like, I've done the soul searching. I've done the work. I've healed from old wounds. I'm ready. I want to connect. And so they're like, bring back the phone date, right? They are virtual dating. They're open to whatever. They're like, can I just grab a bottle of wine and walk around meet him in the park? They're excited.
That's a cool date, by the way.
It's a great date.
I've done that before.
I think all of them are, I think if you want to connect. And if you're a female, reach out to these guys and say, hey, I love what you said on your profile. I can talk Tuesday or Thursday, or do you want to meet me we'll drive through Starbucks and then walk around the park? I really do encourage all my women to go after what they want. They want this relationship too. So I've heard that there's a lot of clients that want to date. I've heard there's a lot of clients that are like, you know what? I could take a break. I created a challenge, Don't Date 30 challenge, to take a break off, no apps, no exes, read a dating book, and just take a break for 30 days and work on your stuff, So some people are really embracing that. And then there's also, what was that? I just heard, there was one other thing that people were really into, but this whole time is such a thoughtful process. And I would say the 2 things that I'm taking away from this is the art of conversation would be huge to practice right now, and diving into your passions, finding out what makes you the happiest. Can you add anything you want to last dating advice or last thoughts of this time period?
Well, I did just think of something while you were chatting there about I'm not a planner in any facet of my life. I tell people it's as if I'm driving in fog and the thing right in front of me is the thing I focus on right then. That's what it is. That's how it is in every piece of my life. It has nothing to do with anybody if I don't plan a date 10 days in advance. That's not how I roll. I just don't do that. I'm a hugely spontaneous person. So don't take it personally if it's Friday at 3:00 and I go, man, I should be cool to have a date tonight. And I reach out to somebody. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, he's not putting any effort in. I'm like, no, that's just not how I think. And I'm in the middle of doing my life. And I go, oh, shit, it'd be fun to meet somebody tonight and do this thing. So I think, not a complaint, but I see a lot of women say, oh, I love spontaneity and adventure. I'm like, all right, well, then prove it. Let's go. Let's go on a date. And I've had amazing first dates that happened within an hour where we like wrote each other and say, hey, you want to do this thing? And we go meet and it's been amazing. So just don't, I guess, be flexible is what I'm getting at. And I don't know. I haven't tried it yet. I'm sure it's coming, but I'm sure we're going to be all doing like FaceTime dates and things like that. And I think I'm always reminded of, people fell in love during World War II by writing letters to each other,
right.
And I've fallen in love with people over email, back and forth. Of course, I've gotten catfished before via email, but I've definitely fallen in love with people that way. So I'm feeling like we're rewinding the clock a little bit to like 1999 or 2000, where you could write to somebody and really get to know them a little bit. Or we've got the technology here to have a quick convo. Just remember to stand inside the window or the door frame so the lighting is great and your eyes pop.
Right. Or download
Don't
this
how
amazing...
I'm sitting right now. In fact, I should do this. I should do this like for the rest of the show. Just flip it over this way so I have good light on my face.
Oh, you do? Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Or add a virtual background.
Is that what yours is?
Yeah.
I wondered why your hair looked weird.
I know.
Like, because it kept going. I was like, oh, wow, your camera's freaking out. Oh, that's cool. You just have a green screen or something?
It's not even a green screen. Zoom has these virtual backgrounds. It's funny, I don't know. I'm sure you've heard this before. If you wait till the last minute, it only takes a minute. That has been the world for, the last 72 hours is just, all right, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out real quick.
Yeah. I love it.
I love it.
Well, any beautiful, smart, funny women that want to find me, I'm at Solo Hour everywhere.
Yes. Or reach out to me. I got it.
Yeah. Reach out to you, even better. Reach out to Jolene.
I'll set you
can
up.
Be my agent.
And I will. I'm gonna drive them to your podcast yesterday because I think it was really, really helpful and is. And I love you. Thank you. You are so inspiring.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. It was fun. I love talking about this stuff. Fun. I'll do it anytime. I love to talk about not only this, but God, I could do 3 hours on male-female dynamics and how strange it is.
I know. And you know what? We really should dedicate some time to kind of opening back up that conversation on that chemistry piece. Everybody's really, really saying that's what they want, and I believe that they can create it more often than they are now. Right. I just think that there's
you got to start saying yes first. Really, the conservative thing is not, it doesn't work. It almost never results in amazing first date or success. Being like super conservative and being like, well, we'll just plan this, and putting him off a couple of times or her off a couple of times. Putting her off a couple of times, and all of a sudden you're 3 weeks in and you haven't gotten together yet, and it just sort of, it just fades.
Right.
Like, meet somebody, get some juice, and go, let's do this. Let's get on and let's see what the chemistry feels like.
Exactly. Yes. Well, thank you again, and I will talk to you soon. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Thanks for having me, everybody. Thanks. See you later.
Bye.